Dear all, in the last lecture, you studied about methods in Java, how we can declare a method, define a method and call a method inside the main function of a program. Through this lecture, we are going to study about method overloading in Java. So you studied about function overloading in C++. What do you mean by function overloading? Function overloading means we can define any number of functions having the same name inside a particular program if they differ in the number of arguments or the type of arguments. Okay, so same concept is applicable in Java too. In Java it is known as method overloading because in Java functions are known as methods. So method overloading in Java can be defined as a feature that allows a class to have more than one method having the same name if their input argument lists are different. Okay, that is same as or that is similar to constructor overloading also. You know that what is a constructor? It is a function having the same name as that of the class name. We studied about parameterized constructors and non-parameterized constructors. So if you are taking one parameterized constructor and one non-parameterized constructor, both are performing function overloading with the difference that one is holding input arguments, other doesn't have any input argument. So constructor overloading is similar to method overloading also. Then how we can differ the functions? Three ways are there to overload a method. First one is number of parameters. For an example, here you can see one add function that is taking two input arguments, both are of type integer. Here second add function is taking three input arguments, all are of type integer. So these two functions are differing in the number of input arguments they are taking, therefore they are different. This is one case of method overloading. Another case is that differ the data type of the parameters. For example, here this side and this side both are taking two input arguments, but in the first case both arguments are of type integer, and in the second type the first argument is of type int and second argument is of type float. So they are differ because the type of data input arguments are different. Another case is sequencing of data type of parameters. For example, these two add functions are having the same number of arguments and same type of arguments, but sequencing is different. In the first case, the first input argument is of type float and second one is of type integer. But in the second case, first one is of type integer and second one is of type float. So they are different. So we can use this function overloading or method overloading method by three means. First one, the number of arguments, second one, the type of arguments, and third one, sequencing of the data types. What is invalid is that here if you are analyzing this, both the add functions are taking the same input arguments, same type, but their return type are different. But this return type are different means these two functions are not different, they are same. Okay, so this type of, that means the arguments and their data types are same, but the return type is different means it is not function overloading. So this is actually function overloading. Now this function overloading is actually an example of static polymorphism. So you heard about polymorphism. Mainly we can divide into two types, compile time polymorphism and runtime polymorphism. So polymorphism means repeatedly using something which is differing in some manner for some useful application. Okay, so here we are repeatedly using the name for some particular application, but we are differing this functions by changing the number or type of the input arguments. So why it is known as compile time polymorphism or compile time binding or early binding or static polymorphism, in the sense that during the compile time itself it will check the compatibility whether the two functions having the same name are same or different by checking the number of arguments, type of arguments, or the sequence of data types. If they are not differing, it will throw the error that it is a compilation error assumption. Okay, so during the compile time itself, it will check for compatibility, and if it is not obeying the actual functionality, it will throw the error. Okay, so let us see an example. Here you can see a class name, display name overloading. So inside the class I have defined two functions having the same name disp. First function is taking the input argument of type character, Second function is taking two input arguments, first one type character and second one type integer. So the number of arguments are differing, therefore these two functions are performing function overloading. And you have to execute this two functions, means these functions are defined inside a class, display overloading. Your main function is inside another class, main. So in order to compile these two functions, you have to first define an object corresponding to display overloading class, and using that object you have to call functions disp with one parameter and disp with two parameters. Okay. Another example is here. It is actually finding the area of three different shapes. Already we have done this problem in C++ language. Here I am repeating the same thing. I have the class find area. Inside the find area class, I am defining three functions having the same name as area. First function is going to calculate the area of a square. Therefore, it is having only one input argument, and I have selected the input argument as type integer, and it is returning the area as side into side. Second area function is taking two input arguments, the length and breadth of a rectangle. So it is finding the area of the rectangle. It will return the product length into breadth. Third function is actually going to find the area of a circle with radius r, and I have defined the area as a float type. So these two functions are different because number of input arguments are different. These two functions are also different because number of arguments are different. These two functions are also different because the type of arguments are different. Okay, so inside the main function, I can execute these three functions using an object that is defined with respect to the class find area where these functions are defined. Okay, so this is how we are performing function overloading or method overloading in Java. Thank you.